Damn, welcome back, Unonite. And guys, I actually got featured on Prydwen's review for Honglan. They've actually got one of my videos up for Honglan's analysis videos there. So guys, do check it out because Prydwen has a very nice analysis on Honglan. And if you want a TLDR, Prydwen's definitely the way to go, right? However, I will be getting more into a lot of things that you may want to know, such as how well do characters actually interact with her, and just how good her kit actually is damage-wise, because we've talked about her already so much, and a lot of YouTubers have as well. So I may as well present some information that you have not seen anywhere else, definitely, right? And we'll be talking about that. Now, so basically how this video will be structured would be basically her sub-skill rotation, and then other sub-skill rotations of other units that you may want to look at in terms of actually enemies you may want to look out for, or units that you could possibly counter using this, right? But sadly, she doesn't really directly counter anyone, if that makes sense, apart from obviously evasion units such as Renee and Lindsay, right? But anyways, apart from that, we will be talking about why Geo is a problem for you and not for enemy Honglans, right? And then, well, how does her actual kit fare against other units? And we actually have so much stats here. I actually have a lot of information I can present you, so we could actually do some proper comparisons, if that makes sense, right? Then we'll be talking about her actual cons and how does each unit properly interact with her, because genuinely I don't see the point in giving you teams that you could just copy paste, because like your team composition would definitely change depending on the stage, right? You cannot just copy paste the same team into every single stage, otherwise this game would be too easy and nobody would be playing it, right? So instead, what I feel like would be more useful is if I explain to you how well does each unit actually interact with Honglan and how well do they work together, right? Then lastly, we'll be ending it off with the actual Keepsake set and possibly a summary, right? So let's get straight into it. What did I mention first? Right, it was the sub-skill rotation for Honglan. Hers is actually a 6-move sub-skill rotation, so it is generally slower. It's actually a bad thing because, one, it is slower, meaning you won't proc your sub-skills as often as you want it to, because this rotation is actually 6 moves, and the fact that it is exactly the same as Geo's, meaning we're probably gonna get countered a lot by Geo because they are both 6 moves. Basically, what I am trying to say is that Geo will literally cleanse your freeze the moment you use, what's this thing called, Ice Dragon. The moment you use Ice Dragon, it's going to be cleansed right away, meaning Freezing Strike will not stun. And that's not the only bad thing, it'll also lock out the damage from her artifact, which if you have it at Legendary Plus, you would not want Geo to keep cleansing that over and over and over and over again, right? So yes, her sub-skill rotation is N1, S1, N1, S2, and then N2. What does this mean? Basically, she starts off with 1 auto attack, right? Then straight into Ice Dragon, then another auto attack in between that before she heads over to Freezing Strike, before she does 2 autos, and then she does another auto. Does that make sense? Basically, after Freezing Strike, she will do 3 autos before she does Ice Dragon as well. That's what it means by ending with N2 and starting with N1, alright? Okay, and then that just loops infinitely, okay? Now, next thing is, why does this make Geo a problem? Because as we've previously mentioned, Geo does use Song of Eternity almost literally right after Honglan uses Ice Dragon, which the problem with this is that this will cleanse off Honglan's Ice Dragon freeze, the freeze that Ice Dragon inflicts on the enemy, right? So completely cleansed, meaning Freezing Strike will not be able to get the stun off, nor will she get the extra damage off, right? And now we'll actually segue this into her kit so that we actually understand what's happening here. And with that, we are going to compare her to a unit such as Mephi. So Mephistopheles, if I could just find her very quickly. Over here, perfect. Now, it's actually kind of funny because they have almost the exact same stats. Don't be scared about the numbers here. We'll only be looking at the attack and just the attack, because their defense and HP are actually completely the same. Keep in mind, this is after artifacts. The only difference is that pretty much Mephi's attack is 9 more than Honglan's. So literally 9 attack is almost well, it's almost negligible, right? No, it is negligible. So anyways, we'll just be using that as a basis. So now assuming the same, assuming they are both hitting the same unit with no extra modifiers, what do I mean by this? Honglan's not hitting a fairy unit because she does do extra damage to fairies. And Mephi will not be hitting a beast unit because Mephi has a 1.25 damage multiplier to beast units, right? So assuming they're hitting the same unit, everything else is the same. Stats, what do you call this? Ascension level, everything's the same, right? Mephi's Prism Ray, which is basically a beam, a 2-meter beam, will do 180% damage. Now, surprisingly, Honglan's is 120%. What does this mean? It means it's doing 2/3 of the amount of damage that Mephi will do. We're not going to be talking about crit here, okay? We're just talking about raw multipliers, right? But then the thing is, she also has a freezing damage of 60% every 2 seconds, but then it changes to 12 seconds at level 3, which is very easy to obtain, to be fair. What does this mean? This is a potential 360 plus 120, 480% before crits. Now, the only thing that can crit here is the damage 120%, which could easily be 240, right? So this sub-skill could literally hit 600%. The reason why I'm comparing them to each other is because they are both beams. Yes, Honglan's is narrower by 0.5 meters, but it's almost completely negligible again, right? So for the most part, it really does not matter. Now, the only difference is that their kits are actually completely different, with Mephi having defense shred, increased crit rate, and Honglan having completely different passive, and she actually has this artifact. So this is why we'll be talking about this now. This was actually changed compared to the previous video, so we do have to talk about this, right? This does change things up a bit because the game did change her artifact the moment Honglan released. That's why Prydwen had to make an update. So yes, it does restore mana, 500 max, but then genuinely 500 does not matter. Even though she does this twice in one rotation, 1000 extra mana, it does help because her mana recharge is absolutely rubbish. But then for the most part, your goal is to have this at like upgrade 3 anyway, which is legendary plus, right? So this basically just adds mana restoration and 110% additional damage. Now this is the part that is interesting, because yes, you add 110%, 230, but the condition is that it is frozen, right? What does this mean? It means we know for sure that since she starts off with her sub skill 1 after her N1, this will only do 120% at the start. However, there is potential for her to almost completely have her freeze uptime up completely if, say, she has enough speed to actually beat these timers, and if she gets her main up in time, which is why we'll be talking about some units that can complement that, such as, say, Geo, right? The reason why this 110% is actually so good is because this actually makes this stronger than Mephi's. Now, yes, Mephi's is different because it does reduce the enemy's accuracy by 20, but then that's not everything there is to it, right? We're talking about raw damage. This is why you might be surprised why your Honglan is doing so much damage, right? Because I did mention her kit is cleansable, but then that is not everything. She actually does a decent amount of damage as a, well, not even a main DPS unit. So 230%. Now, this could go up to times 2 for 60%. Freezing damage 60% times 6, that's 360. Top of my head, what did I just say? 230, 460 plus 360. That is 820%. And again, she has the same stats as Mephi, so yeah, think about that for a second, right? This doesn't mean you could choose one over the other. You could literally have them in the same team, right? So that's really, really good. Now we can look at Freezing Strike, which is a very mid skill. Now again, the difference is this, is that Mephi does have less offensive skills than Honglan, if you'd be surprised, because her S2 does not do damage, right? It does increase the crit damage, but then we're talking about raw damage, right? It does not do damage. Meanwhile, Honglan's does. And again, this has potential. Actually, even right away at the start of a match, this can go 240% right away because she does use this after Ice Dragon, right? So 240% with a potential stun. And times 2, boom, 480% of sub skill. But again, you know what? We'll forget about crits this time. 240 is very, very good because again, this is stronger than Mephi's. Now the range of this is actually kind of bad. Again, this is literally the size of Catherine's invincibility, but then instead of it being the center of the circle being around Catherine, it is around the nearest enemy, which for the most part 80% of the time this will be a tank. Alright, so she does help out a lot with that, which you love to see. Now when it comes to her kit, what else does she offer? She does have mana reduction, which if you pair these two together is actually really good, to be fair, because we'll talk about her ultimate first, right? We'll look at level 3. 200% freezing damage, 70% for 8 seconds. So this is 480% potential with a mana decrease of 2500. As if this wasn't enough for a good ult, this game just said yeah, we'll slap some stun on her kit. So like boom, there we go, we have a very nice ultimate on Honglan. Now this won't do as much damage as Villanas for obvious reasons, right? But then this does do enough to make it relevant because it is a full screen, right? Now this isn't the type of ultimate you would spam, definitely not, right? Especially if you want to nuke an enemy, or enemies for that matter. But then this does have enough utility where if enemies are spread out and you need to do damage to every single one of them plus extra util, then boom, this is literally the perfect ultimate for you. Like you cannot complain about having this ultimate because it does actually a decent amount of damage. Now moving on straight to her skill, this is literally the only active skill that we have that actually damages literally everyone on the enemy team. So that is really good, right? So this basically just does 130% damage on impact, 65% times 4, so literally like 390% plus mana decrease of 2000. Now again, these two aren't that their mana decrease isn't a lot on paper, but then this does add up, right? And it does save you pretty much an entire move for both of these, right? So that's also already very good. Now again, all of her mana reduction does stack together because especially once you get this thing to upgrade for, which is eternal plus an origin, she will have mana reduction on pretty much every single move that she has available, just except her autos, right? So very good, because literally half of the time she'll be going like, actually no, more than half of the time she'll be reducing the enemy's mana reduction. And how does this all tie in together? Well, the passive, reducing the enemy's speed by 14%, innovation by 21. This is as offensive as it gets because she does have a full screen active. Reducing everyone's evasion by 21 literally just by breathing is bonkers, and that is crazy. Speed decrease of 14%, which just drops everyone's by, sorry, I don't even know why I have to do this, I'm just doing this for you guys. So there's literally just 86 speed, right? Because like, yeah, see, because it is 1 minus 0.14, so you do get that one. Now jumping straight into it, we did already finally talk about how she starts off a match. She does have potential to do more damage to Mephi than Mephi in her sub-skill rotations, but obviously in ultimate this is a completely different story because Mephi's ultimate literally just nukes the enemy, right? It's actually crazy. So now that we actually have that, what are her main cons? Her biggest con is that she actually charges mana very slowly. Is this really a bad thing? No, because again, we did mention that she doesn't need her main to actually be doing so much damage, and that is literally why after a match, when you check your stats, you're wondering, how the hell is my Honglan doing damage when this man said that she's not a main DPS unit? Again, she's not. It's really just because her sub skills are really good in general, especially because I consider this a buff for her artifact. Keep in mind, I actually forgot to mention this. Her artifact is really good because you get attack, HP, crit rate, crit damage. What more could you ask for? Right? They literally gave her everything that's good. She doesn't need any resistances. That's completely fine. They didn't give her any. Now, let's actually talk about her cons. Again, charges mana very slowly, rebutted already. Geo is kind of a soft counter because again, every time she uses Ice Dragon it is cleansed, so she'll miss out on damage from Freezing Strike and the stun. So kind of peak, but then that's not everything there is to it, because why you cannot cleanse mana reduction. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So speed decrease doesn't, oh, this is another thing. Personally, I would have preferred a speed increase instead of a speed decrease, because speed decrease does not slow down the clock, right? So I would have preferred a 16.27. Like, why do I say 16 by 27? Let me just explain why. 16.27% increase instead of a 14% enemy decrease on speed, which would basically mean that they'll have the same effect, but at least be more efficient at preventing time fails, if that makes sense. Because there are some cases where you do run out of time because you failed to kill the enemy clear, right? It just happens. That's life. Now, when it comes to the actual artifact, units that do go well with her, I do want to start this off with Lindsay, which is not a very common pick, or like something that people won't really be thinking about right away. Why? Because Lindsay has good evasion, and lowering the enemy's speed makes it more annoying because this woman actually has taunt on her kit. Attention, let me just... Basically, because Lindsay does have pretty much a taunt built into her passive, which if you're not familiar with, you do know now. Basically, whoever she attacks is taunted towards her, provoking it to attack her and reducing its accuracy by 20. Plus, Lindsay gets like 50 extra evasion. And then if Honglan slows down the enemy speed, well, yeah, you kind of know where this is going, right? So, Lindsay becomes even stronger. That's how they interact. Next one would actually be Chloe. Now, there are two reasons why they actually go well together. One is because Chloe's really good at bunching up melee DPS units. Sorry, not even melee DPS. Melee units in general on the enemy team, because when they are taunted her, they literally like run towards her. Like, yeah. Then Lindsay does... Sorry, why am I talking about Lindsay? Then this does help Honglan be able to hit pretty much everyone with her Ice Dragon, and then straight into Freezing Strike, which could potentially stun them and all that jazz. Right now, apart from that, reducing the enemy speed actually helps the healer keep tanks such as Chloe and Claire alive even longer, right? So it's not just that they're attacking slower. This speed slow actually allows more window time to let your healers breathe and actually keep Chloe alive, right? Now, another unit for tank that actually be useful would be Adrienne, because Adrienne hook will now hit more consistently with the evasion decrease, especially for ranged units at the back. So, you know, pulling those IMS would be like 10 times easier, right? Next up would be Mephi. We've already mentioned this because Mephi does have a full screen debuff, but Honglan and Impact will still hit like a wet noodle on her main, right? But then that's not really it. The fact is, we do get a full screen main, which isn't even that bad of a multiplier, considerably less than Mephi's obviously, but then we'll take it because it does reduce their defense, right? And we do get so much damage over time with it, where if you time it right, things will go in your favor. Right, next up we do have Talia, because Talia will almost completely prevent Geo from reducing your team's speed, because Geo's speed decrease is stronger than Honglan's passive. Actually, if I could just show you here very quickly. There we go. 20% speed decrease, and the freeze towards you, it's completely peak. So you'll be slower than Geo. You'll be slower than Geo's team for a bit, if that makes sense. But Talia, will help out with that, because Geo's accuracy is 4, so reducing their accuracy by 20 actually does help a lot, especially with RNG runs, right? Now, this will not help you 99% of the time, but this does help your RNG. Now, this is a perfect segue to actually be talking about Geo. She actually works really well with Geo, and the fact that she's human and being in a good faction actually helps, which is really easy to build around, because this could help even out an enemy Geo's speed decrease as well, because they'll basically cancel each other out, right? And with the evasion decrease, Geo can inflict freeze damage over time to a lot of other units and slow them down, with freeze benefiting Honglan, because again, her kit does get so much more damage, and second effects when enemies are frozen. So boom, hand in hand. Now, does this mean you'll be using them together all the time? Definitely not, right? They're always very situational. That's why I'm not giving you any teams. Now, Vivienne, how would they work together? This is actually one of the more interesting ones, just for the maths. Okay, not really for like complete utility. Vivienne's obviously like bonkers, but that's not really what I'm trying to say. We'll mainly just be looking at Westerly, because this is her sub skill that does increase everyone's speed for 10 seconds. Let me just tell you what's gonna happen in that 10-second time frame. How would they work together? So Honglan's speed decrease is, again, we mentioned this, 14%, right? So the enemies would be 0.86, right? Not 0.86. Let's just establish that. Now, with Vivienne having a 20% speed increase to your entire team, this does shoot up to a 120, right? Now, you may think, oh, 120 minus 86 is 34%. That's not how it works, babes. You divide them. Then now what do we get? Oh, sorry. Yeah. This is I'm going crazy. Now this is a 40% increase, virtually a 40%, 39.5, meaning your units during that 10-second time frame will be hitting 40% faster. Now this is actually a speed increase I could get behind, right? Now obviously there are other units such as other beasts, but then I don't really care too much for the other beasts. Because okay, fine, just in case you're curious, if you are going to rock her with units such as Haru, obviously you're going to want another melee unit, 2 other melee units to go with that, right? So just keep that in mind, because Haru does give a 30% attack buff to your entire team as long as she's with 2 other units, and she does have her artifact for camouflage. So Haru is actually a really good unit. Now with the other beasts, I wouldn't really go with Mika and Siha, to be fair. Obviously they work, so if you want to go for it, like, definitely go for it. They're not even bad, right? If that makes sense. I have Ira, actually a decent ascension, but then I still wouldn't use her, honestly, because there's so many better other units, which I am 99% sure you have. Okay, so no need to do that. We've already mentioned why Suni is not really a good tank, right? It doesn't really matter what you think. Suni's not a good tank, I'm sorry to say, right? But this isn't me like trying to bash the beasts in general. I might actually make a video on that, like why the beasts are so bad, and actually talk about every single one of them. Now, how well does she fare in current content? She is absolutely bonkers in arena. Like, that speed decrease and full screen everything is just so valuable, and she doesn't even need her ultimate, so that's how you know she's a good unit. Every other form of content she does very well, yes, including Battlefront. Now, to make her even more useful, I would recommend getting her artifact to at least Legendary Plus, right? This should be your gold standard. Anything more, yeah, which is okay, does give mana reduction, but you don't really need that. But this 100, oh wait, but then you do get a lot of stats from the artifact, so keep that in mind as well, right? So you may want to upgrade it. So yeah, you really want this. The 110% is just really so big. But just in case you're curious how much worse off it is without, let's just use Ice Dragon as our basis. So 110 plus 120, 230 over 190. You are missing out on 21% of damage just by not going straight to Legendary Plus. And this is just for one sub skill, plus all the attack stats and crit rate, crit damage stats that you get, right? So just keep that in mind. That's my recommendation. My other recommendations for her would be just to have a good tank healer combo in general, and have a good source of DPS as well, because she cannot solo carry, if that makes sense. She wants another DPS unit. And again, adjust to the enemy team composition. Now, to end it off, I do want to talk about which keepsake you want to go on her. So I only actually made those keepsake suggestions before I realized the actual value of 4-piece keepsake bonus sets. So basically, what you would probably want to go for would not be a crit rate. If anything, you'd want to go for either 4-piece crit damage, 4-piece speed, and 4-piece attack. Again, we actually are going to consider attack here because her dot scales of her attack, which you will actually get a lot of damage off with the damage over time anyway. even if you don't get all of it, right? Just because the multipliers are so high, where even if you only get a few ticks in, you know, it's still a decent amount of damage. And well, damage over time doesn't crit, so yeah. Crit damage just because, like, you know, it will help her with her on damage impact, which on her sub skill rotations are actually not that bad as long as you are able to proc her artifact again, right? And lastly, speed, just because, again, as we mentioned with the interaction with Vivienne, speed bonuses are actually really good, especially when the enemy's speed is debuffed, just because you won't just be getting this 6%, you will actually get 4 and 6%, meaning you'll have a 10% speed increase, which, well, will be more than 10%. Like, you'll be moving more than 10% than the enemy, basically, just because they're slowed by 14%, right? So yeah. So lastly, we'll just go with a summary. She is a really good unit. I completely agree with the SS in the PvE mid tier. You may want to bring her to level 181 and or at least 161, so that you could actually feel her effects even more. And well, apart from that, how well she fares against other units, her multiplier is actually very high, with her sub-skill rotation doing more damage than Mephi, but then she is a very slow unit because she does have a 6-move turn. And her main's not as strong as other units, sure, but it is very strong because it is full screen, and that's what makes her a secondary unit, because she has good AoE DPS. She does have a good start to a match, but then she just gets stronger as the match goes on, right? Especially because the speed decrease on the enemy, you will just feel it the longer the match goes on for. She does have her cons, but then it really does not matter because she is a good unit at the end of the day. So she is very good. She will continue to get better because currently Beast is bad, but then as the new Beast units come out, with them being meta, you could definitely see Honglan having a spot there, with her passive being very, very valuable. Right? So if that video was useful to you, then please do consider subscribing, join the Discord, and, well, just stay happy, alright? It's been Uno Night, and I'll see you in the next one.